I knew before I saw it. The late nights, the locked phone, the smell of cologne that wasn't mine. I tried to bury the doubts, but they grew louder every day. When I finally followed the trail, I ended up at the door to my own bedroom. What I saw shattered me, my wife and with another man, and yet what broke me wasn't the act, it was her eyes, cold, defiant. She didn't even cover herself. She just whispered, "This is my body, not yours." I froze, my heart pounding, but I never raised my voice. I slipped off my ring, placed it on the dresser, and walked out. That was the night I stopped being her husband and started being free. Before we continue, do me a favor. Hit like and subscribe so you never miss what's next. I used to know the rhythm of our house the way you know your own heartbeat. The kettle's whistle at 7:15, her shoes clicking down the hall at 7:32, the muffled pop of the front door seal when it closes, a sound I could hear even from the shower. We built a life inside those small, predictable sounds. I thought routine meant safety, that repetition meant love had settled into something reliable. I thought wrong. The first hairline crack was so small, I almost missed it. Her phone started sleeping face down. It used to live on the counter, lighting up like a tiny lighthouse, her mother's name or a friend's group chat pulsing in the corner while she cooked. It never bothered me. We both had passwords we both knew. But then one night, while we ate in the living room, I heard a buzz against the coffee table and saw her hand dart, not reach, not casually extend, dart, like a reflex born in secret. She lifted the phone, thumbed it awake under the table, and angled her body away from me the way a person turns away from the wind. I didn't say anything. My brain wrote it off as work stress, someone from her team needing an answer about a deadline. It did not stop. The buzzes multiplied like gnats only she could hear. A new ringtone appeared, short, bright, a sound like a coin dropped on glass. It would chime, and she would tense, a flinch that died in the shoulders. When I asked who it was, she gave me names I knew, a co-worker, her sister, a client she'd mentioned in passing. The answers were plausible. The answers were practiced. I didn't know that yet. I started noticing her smell. You can tell a lot about a person by the way their scent changes when they come home. She used to bring back the day, coffee, printed, paper, the faint talc of office carpet, a citrus lotion I bought her on a trip. Now she arrived carrying something that didn't come from our life. It was cologne, the kind meant to sound like thunder or oceans. Not mine, not any of our friends. She wore it like a bruise she didn't see, and I felt it like a bruise I couldn't ignore. We had inside jokes, dumb little things that made us both grin. One of them was the wine glass with the faint lipstick ring that never came out in the dishwasher. She'd pretend the glass was cursed and I'd call it jealous. That glass began to sit on the counter untouched, a ring drying at its rim, even on nights I didn't pour wine. She'd say she had a late call and take her drink to the bedroom, door clicking, voice lowered. I would pass the door with laundry and hear her laugh, the one that used to loosen the world in my chest. It didn't loosen now. It tightened like someone cinching a belt around my lungs. Doubt is a slow poison. It doesn't knock you to the floor, it sits in your blood and waits. You start doing things you don't recognize. I found myself memorizing small details. The way she angled her bag when she set it down. The precise time the shower turned on. The number of miles added to the car after she claimed an errand. I hated myself for it. I wanted to be the man who trusted his wife without thinking, because that's who I had been. But trust is not blind. It's a light you choose to turn on. And I realized I had been wandering a room with the switch taped down. One Thursday I woke at 2 in the morning to silence so complete it sounded like a diagnosis. She wasn't in bed. The bathroom door was closed, a thin line of light painting the floor. I could hear the faint flick of her nail on glass, the tap of fingers texting. I told myself she couldn't sleep and was scrolling. I told myself this, so I did not have to ask the question that felt like a razor in my mouth. Who are you talking to at 2 in the morning? The answer would either be the truth that killed me or the lie that did the same job slower. At work I was a ghost. People talked, and I watched their mouths move like I was underwater. My inbox grew teeth. I got coffee I did not taste. In meetings, I used her phrases without thinking, the small professional niceties that once charmed me, only to hate them as they left my lips. It was as if all the language we had shared was suddenly borrowed, and I did not know from whom. I started cooking, more elaborate dinners, as if impressing a stranger who might be deciding whether to stay. Roasted chicken with lemon garlic, her favorite. Hand-rolled pasta I learned from a video. Flour dusting the countertop like fresh snow. She ate and smiled, said it was wonderful, said she was lucky, said she had to hop on a call. The food made no difference. Love cannot bribe a secret. The first time I checked her purse, I did it with academic detachment, convincing myself I was looking for a pen. My hand touched the zippered inner pocket and paused. Her hand had always moved to that pocket quickly, unconsciously, when I walked into a room while she was putting away her wallet. I unzipped it. Receipts. A hotel bar I didn't know, 2 drinks, a timestamp that matched a night she'd told me she was at a networking event across town. I closed the pocket and stood still, the receipt burning through leather like a hot plate. I told myself there were explanations. I told myself there are always explanations if you want them badly enough, but explanations did not stop the new habits. She began wearing new lipstick, a shade I once would have loved on her because it made her look like the best version of herself. She started to work out late. She started to shower before coming home. She started to turn her face when I kissed her, just slightly, as if our kiss was a picture and she was avoiding the camera. Once, in a moment that still makes me feel like my bones are hollow, I reached to touch her waist as she walked past, and she said, lightly but firmly, "Not now, I'm on a call," then moved my hand the way you move a curtain. Our bed became geography. There is a border that appears before you acknowledge it, a demilitarized zone of tangled sheets you both avoid. You can feel another person's absence like cold air leaking from a window you can't find. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, the shadow of its blades pricing time into slices. Every slice was another thought I didn't want. I tried to fix us in the most ordinary ways. I suggested a weekend away. She said work was impossible. I booked a single night at a simple cabin anyway, 2 hours drive, nothing fancy, just trees, and the sound of a river, a place where phones die and you have to look each other in the face. She agreed, then remembered a training she couldn't miss. The cabin reservation sat in my email like a tombstone. Then came the laugh that did not belong to our house. We hosted 2 friends for dinner, and when everyone left, she took her phone to the patio to catch up with her mom. I heard the pitch of her voice change, the way it used to when we were first falling in love. Lighter, faster, the sound of trying to be charming. I stepped into the kitchen and paused by the open window. "I miss you," she said, and the words were soft enough to wear a nightgown. I held my breath. "No, he's here," she said, then a small pause. "Tomorrow." The word dropped like a nail on tile. She came back in, smiling, with that good company smile that never reaches the muscles that matter. I smiled back with something that felt like rigor mortis. I want to say I confronted her then, that I chose dignity over dread. But this story is not a movie, and I'm not a hero with a speech in his pocket. I washed the plates. I wiped the counters. I stood at the sink until the water ran cold and my hands ached. Later we brushed our teeth side by side, our faces in the mirror like a stock photo of a marriage. When we got into bed, she turned on her side back to me, and I lay awake wondering whether the curve of her spine had always looked like a question mark. The next morning, I decided to stop being a passenger. I left for work early, doubled back, 20 minutes later, and parked at the end of the street. I watched our house the way strangers watch houses they plan to rob. I hated myself for it and did it anyway. Nothing happened. She left for work on time, walked to her car, called someone with her head down, drove away like any other morning. I followed at a distance, if you can call 5 car lengths a distance. She went to the office. That's what broke me a little. How normal it all seemed when you look from far away. When I finally faced it, really faced it, was the night the lock on truth broke. We were watching a show sitting on opposite ends of the couch, pretending to share a life by sharing a plot. Her phone lit up on the cushion between us, face down out of habit, but not enough to hide the edge of the notification that glowed along the side. A second later it buzzed again, and the new tone, the bright coin-on-glass tone, rang in the quiet. She inhaled, just enough to mark it, and reached. I reached faster. It wasn't a graceful movement. The phone skidded against my palm. Her nails caught my wrist, and I heard myself say her name in a voice I didn't recognize, low and final. She froze, then let go. For a moment we were two people holding our breath in the same living room with very different oxygen. I turned the phone over. My hand was shaking so hard it made the screen blur. I wiped my palm on my jeans. Locked screen. Looking up like an eye, I tapped the screen awake, and the name burned through every lie I had memorized. It buzzed again. The same name. The same bright tone. The man I did not know was calling my wife, calling again, while we sat on our couch pretending nothing was wrong. I stared at it ringing, the light pulsing like a heartbeat I could not unhear, and my thumb hovered over the green circle while my mouth forgot how to make words. And then on that coffee table we had picked out together, under the soft lamp we'd argued about buying, my wife's phone lit up one more time with the man's name and a message that made my lungs forget what air is. When the phone stopped buzzing, the silence in the room wasn't silence at all. It was the hum of everything I didn't want to face pressing in on me, heavy and suffocating. I set the phone down on the coffee table, screen still lit, the man's name staring back at me like a brand carved into my skin. She sat there across from me, legs tucked beneath her like we were just two people watching a show, but her eyes told the truth. She refused to speak. Cold, defiant, waiting for me to either explode or collapse. I didn't do either. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water and drank it in silence. My hands shook so hard the rim clicked against my teeth. When I came back, she had already flipped her phone over, as if burying the evidence could erase what I saw. She didn't ask me what I thought. She didn't try to explain. She just stared at the TV, a character's voice filling the air like cheap wallpaper covering cracks in the wall. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest tight, her body turned away from me, her phone glowing faintly on the nightstand. Every buzz was a knife. Every second was proof. Sleep didn't come. Instead, something darker did. The decision that if she wasn't going to confess, I would make her truth confess itself. I became a detective in my own marriage. The next morning, while she showered, I slipped her phone from the nightstand. My hands trembled as if the device itself could burn me. Of course, the password had changed. She had used the same one for years, the anniversary we used to celebrate. Now, after I caught her phone in my hand, she had changed it. That stung almost more than the buzzing itself. It wasn't just secrecy, it was planning. She had drawn a line and I wasn't on her side anymore. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I played the long game. At work, I called the phone. Carrier, pretending to ask about billing. When I pressed the representative, I learned more than I expected. The account had unusual call patterns, repeated late-night calls to the same number, sometimes lasting over an hour. I wrote the number down, hand shaking so badly the pen left scars in the paper. I drove past the address tied to that number later that week. A bland beige apartment complex, the kind built too fast and too cheaply, where doors all looked the same and hallways smelled faintly of cigarettes and loneliness. My chest clenched as I parked across the street, engine idling, watching people come and go. I didn't know which door was his. I didn't even know what car he drove. But I knew. My wife had been here. At home, the evidence piled up like snow against a door. Receipts tucked into her purse, rideshare charges on our joint account, mileage on her car that didn't match the errands she claimed to run. She tried to cover her tracks, but she wasn't careful enough. Or maybe she didn't care if I noticed anymore. One night while she was in the shower, I found the hotel keycard in her gym bag. A cheap chain hotel by the highway, the kind of place you stop when you don't plan to stay long. My stomach turned as I held it, the plastic warm from being against her things. I dropped it back into her bag, washed my hands, and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My eyes looked older, my face hollow, like the man staring back at me had aged 10 years in 10 days. I started saving everything. Receipts, screenshots, call logs. I kept them in a folder on my laptop, buried under work files she'd never open. It wasn't because I wanted to use them yet. It was because I needed proof for myself. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Proof that I wasn't inventing shadows. Proof that she really was betraying me in the bed we once called ours. The worst part wasn't the evidence. The worst part was pretending, sitting across from her at dinner, nodding along to her stories about work, watching TV together, her head leaning against the same shoulder she had turned away from days before. Making love once out of routine more than desire, and feeling her body there but her soul already somewhere else. I'd roll over after, staring into the dark, my chest hollow. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I couldn't. Because I knew if I opened my mouth, the life I had been clinging to would collapse for good. And I wasn't ready yet. Not ready to let go, not ready to be free. Not until I saw it with my own eyes. That chance came faster than I thought. One Friday night, she told me she was working late. A team project, she said, with that professional smile that had become her mask. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and watched her leave. 10 minutes later, I was in my car, following at a distance. Her tail lights glowed red in the night as she drove not toward her office, but out of town. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles went white. Mile after mile I followed, headlights low, heart pounding. Finally, she pulled into a hotel parking lot. Not the chain by the highway this time. A nicer one, cleaner. A place where people checked in with luggage and checked out with memories. I parked 2 rows back and watched her step out of the car. She smoothed her hair in the side mirror, checked her lipstick, then walked inside. Alone. My pulse roared in my ears as I stared at the glowing hotel sign above her. I didn't follow her in. Not yet. I sat there, engine off, chest burning, waiting. 10 minutes later, a man walked across the lot, shoulders broad, phone pressed to his ear. He went inside. I already knew who he was. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the woman who had come home past midnight. Her makeup smudged, her hair tousled, the smell of him still clinging faintly to her skin. She slid under the covers, turned away, and whispered goodnight, like nothing was wrong. I stared at her back, the silence thick between us, and I made myself a promise. The next time she lied to me, the next time her phone buzzed, the next time her mask slipped, I wouldn't just collect evidence. I would end this marriage in the same silence she had created, and when I walked out, I would leave her naked in it. I used to think the cruelest feeling in the world was not knowing. I was wrong. The cruelest feeling is knowing and walking toward it anyway. The night it happened began like 1,000 harmless nights. Dishes stacked on the rack, the soft hum of the fridge. A show paused on the screen. 2 actors frozen mid-sentence like they were waiting on us to decide whether they got to keep their happy ending. She stood by the mirror near the hallway, running a fingertip along her bottom lip to neaten the lipstick. She had already perfected. The red was new. It made her look like a poster for a life that didn't include me. "I'll be home late," she said. No explanation. No gentle lie this time. It sounded like a script she'd repeated until it no longer needed the rehearsal. I nodded. My mouth was dry. "Do you need the car?" She hesitated, the smallest pause, then shook her head. "No. I'll grab a ride." We both understood what rides are for after midnight. I helped her with the clasp of her necklace. My hands were steady, and I hated that they were steady. I wanted them to betray me, to shake, to tell the truth my voice refused to. The pendant settled against her collarbone the way a key finds its lock. She didn't meet my eyes in the mirror. She didn't need to. My reflection said enough. A man standing behind his wife, fastening a piece of jewelry he did not buy for, the evening he could not bear. "Don't wait up," she said. "I won't," I lied. The door clicked shut. The muffled pop of the seal, that old familiar sound, hit me like a memory you wish you could return for a refund. I stood there listening to the silence she left behind, counting heartbeats the way you count seconds underwater. At some point, the quiet loosened its grip on my legs and I moved. I did not plan the exact hour. That would have made it feel like a mission. This wasn't a mission. It was a man walking through a burning house, trying to see which room was left. I waited until the tires of her rideshare had long since whispered off our street. Then I put on my jacket, slid my wallet into my pocket, and took the spare key from the dish by the door, the one with the tiny scratch where it had once fallen on the driveway. I stared at that scratch too long, as if it could tell me how to live. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. I walked to the car and sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel, not turning the key, just feeling the shape of it between my fingers. The dashboard light washed the interior in a weak blue glow that made me look like a photograph developed in the wrong chemicals. I turned the ignition, listened to the engine cough and settle, and drove. I had the address. Not the beige apartment. Complex this time. Not the nicer hotel with the lobby that smelled like citrus and money. I had the address I knew too well, my own. You can track a lie across a city, but the cruelest ones complete their circle and come home. I parked 2 houses down beneath the dark rib of a bare tree. I sat there long enough for my breath to fog the windshield. The house looked the way it always looked at night. A soft rectangle of light in the bedroom window, the porch lamp swallowing moths, the front lawn turned to silver by the streetlight. Nothing about it suggested a disaster. That is the violence of betrayal. It keeps its face ordinary. I walked up the path like a stranger visiting for the first time. The key was warm from my pocket when I slid it into the lock. I paused, hand on the knob, and heard it. Voices. Not loud, not frantic. The soft cadence of 2 people who think they are alone in the world. There is a way a house sounds when it's being used against you. Every board knows how to be quiet. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The air had changed. The living room held the faint echo of a laugh that was not mine. The hallway smelled like her perfume, and something else on the edge of it. Aftershave with a name meant to make you feel taller than you are. I didn't call out. My shoes were a series of measured commas on the hardwood as I walked toward the bedroom. The door was ajar. A slice of light cut across the hall carpet, thin as a blade. My hand touched the wood and felt the thrum of my pulse in the grain. I pushed. Our room was bright. The lamp on my nightstand, my lamp the one I bought because she said the other threw too much glare, made everything look like a stage set, carefully lit to flatter no one. Sheets tangled, the duvet half off the foot of the bed, pillows in, her geography I did not recognize. Her hair dark against white, his shoulders a block of shadow where a headboard should have been the border of my day. Time didn't slow. That's a lie people tell themselves so they don't have to admit they saw everything at once. She turned her head and saw me. He froze first, like prey that forgets running is an option. His mouth opened, a fish forgetting how air works. He reached for the sheet, the clumsy decency of a man who has already forfeited the right to it. I did not look at him. It took nothing to decide not to learn his face. She didn't grab the sheet. She did not cover herself. She did not flinch. She propped herself on one elbow, hair falling forward in a way I had once traced with my fingers, and watched me the way you watch a storm roll over the ocean you do not plan to swim in. There is a version of this story where I shout. There is another where I cry. In some people throw things, in others they make speeches. I did not have any of those versions in me anymore. I had only the precision of a man who has run out of words and is now using the exact number required to finish a sentence. Leave, I said, without looking at him. He moved badly, caught foot, muttered apology to no one, scramble of fabric and guilt. Then he was past me, a blur of cologne and panic. I heard the soft percussion of his steps down the hall, the choked metal of the front door handle under his hand, and then the house swallowed him and was quiet again. It was only us. She watched me. In that look, I recognized everything I had been avoiding. The distance that had walked into our rooms months ago and unpacked its suitcase, the forgiveness I had offered by instinct withers under certain light. This was that light. I stepped farther into the room. My feet found the cold spot. On the floorboard I'd meant to fix last winter. I stood beside the dresser. The wedding photo, us at the end of the day, hair coming loose, her head against my shoulder, sat in its frame like a witness. I turned the frame face down without looking away from her. The soft thud of it, meeting wood, sounded like a gavel. In a small courtroom. We were quiet for a long time. It could have been seconds, it could have been a calendar. The ceiling fan traced lazy arcs that moved no air. "Say something," I managed, but it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like an administrative request. "State your name for the record." Her chin lifted a fraction. Her eyes were not soft. They were not sorry. They were sharp with the kind of resolve that is born when a person has tried an excuse on in a mirror enough times to believe it fits. "This is my body," she said, each word a measured stone dropping into a clear pond. "Not yours." The sentence didn't shout. It didn't need to. It slid into place and locked, a bolt drawn from the inside. I felt the weight of it move through my ribs and settle behind my sternum like something metallic. I let the silence stand. I let the house hear it. I let myself see the exact shape of the person in front of me, not an accident, not a weak moment, not a mistake reaching for cover, a choice that had learned to call itself a principle. I had 100 responses. None of them were useful. Some would have been small, some would have tried to make jokes out of glass. But in that instant I understood that answers are wasted on statements designed to be walls. I nodded once. It wasn't agreement. It was acknowledgement. "I hear you. I see the person you are willing to be. I do not need to stay and argue with." A locked door. She watched me walk around the bed. I went to my side, the indentation in the mattress shaped by years of sleep. The nightstand held the ordinary debris of a life. Earplugs in a tiny case, a book with a folded page, the lamp with the good light. My ring felt heavier than gold has any right to feel. I turned it with my thumb the way I always did when I was thinking. My hand was steady again, and I hated it again. Behind me, I could feel her breath on the air, the slow and even kind that belongs to someone who believes she has stated a truth that exempts her from consequences. It was not defiance anymore. It was a kind of victory that mistook itself for freedom. I slid open the top drawer and took out the small velvet box from our wedding day, the one that had held the ring before vows made it a promise. I placed it on the dresser. I could see our reflection in the mirror, me upright and tired, her reclined and certain. We looked like two people at the end of a negotiation no one wanted to sign. "Is that it?" she asked. No tremor. Only curiosity, as if she were asking whether we were out of milk. "That's it," I said, but my voice came from a room I hadn't known I carried inside me. I turned back to the dresser, lifted the ring halfway off my finger, and paused. The metal caught the lamp's light and drew a circle of white on the wood. The moment stretched until it felt like a bridge I had to cross without looking down. I could have spoken then. I could have told her about the nights I counted the lies, by the beats of our ceiling fan. I could have set down every receipt, every call log, every memory like evidence bags in a line. I could have asked for reasons, demanded apologies, negotiated an ending that let us both pretend we were still good people in a bad situation. Instead, I left the ring balanced on the edge of my knuckle, a decision suspended in the space between two breaths, and listened to the house remember how to breathe without us. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the block. A dog barked, quick and low. The night went on for the rest of the city, indifferent and open-mouthed. In our room, the pages of the book on my nightstand riffled themselves as the vent kicked on. She shifted on the bed. The sheets slid a little. Her eyes didn't leave my hands. And then, from the hallway, the phone we shared for the landline we almost never used began to ring. An old sound, a reminder of a life that existed before passwords and brightness settings and face-down lies. It rang once, twice. I looked at the ring in my hand, then at the phone on the wall, the sound coming from another decade. On the third ring, I closed my fingers. The landline kept ringing. A relic from another time. Its sound cut through the room like a voice I hadn't heard in years. We never used it anymore, no one did. Bills went digital, friends texted, family FaceTimed. Yet here it was, shrill, insistent, demanding. I glanced toward the hallway, but I didn't move. She didn't either. 3 rings became 4, then 5. And then it stopped. The house exhaled. I turned back to her. She was still on the bed, the sheet low across her waist, her eyes fixed on me like we were opponents waiting for the referee to call the next round. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't even nervous. That was the part. That hollowed me out. The calm. She had already decided who she was, and it wasn't the woman I thought I married. I looked at the ring again. It sat loose on my finger, gravity pulling at it, begging me to finish what I had started. My thumb nudged it over the knuckle. I thought of the day I first slipped it on, sunlight falling across her veil, her hand trembling in mine, her smile like a lighthouse cutting through fog. That memory used to warm me. Now it burned. I set the ring on the dresser, face down beside the velvet box. It landed with a dull metallic click, quiet but final, the sound of a lock sliding into place. I didn't look back at her as I turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. Her voice wasn't frantic. It wasn't soft. It was almost bored, like she was asking me to pass the salt at dinner. "I'm done," I said, and those two words tasted like blood and freedom at the same time. The hallway stretched before me, longer than I remembered. The family photos on the wall, the vacations, the birthdays, the laughing faces, felt like mugshots now. I couldn't look them in the eyes. I walked past them like a stranger passing through someone else's house. The front door was heavy in my hand. My pulse beat in my throat as I pulled it open. Cold night air rushed in, smelling of damp earth and the faint sweetness of someone's fireplace down the street. For a moment I just stood there staring into the dark, knowing that the life I'd built was behind me, and whatever came next was a cliff I couldn't see the bottom of. I stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind me. Not slammed, not locked. Just shut, like a chapter ending without punctuation. I walked to my car, each step an echo. My fingers brushed the key in my pocket, but I didn't unlock the door. I leaned against the hood instead, staring at the house. The bedroom light was still on. A shadow moved across the curtain, her shadow. She hadn't followed me, she hadn't begged, she hadn't run after me crying. She was just there. That was the silence I had never understood before. The kind that isn't empty, but full, swollen with every word never said. Never. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe hours. Long enough for the night to chill my bones, long enough for the ache in my chest to settle into something I knew would never leave. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, then again. Messages. I didn't read. Calls I didn't answer. It wasn't her number. It wasn't anyone I cared to hear from. Finally, I opened the car and slid inside. The seat was cold against my back. My hands gripped the wheel but didn't turn it. The dashboard clock ticked forward, numbers changing with mechanical indifference. I thought about going to a friend's place, but the thought of knocking on someone's door and explaining why I showed up with hollow eyes and no luggage made me feel like a ghost. I thought about driving until the road ran out, but that felt like running, and I wanted to leave, not flee, so I just sat there, engine off, staring at the house. The home I had built, the home I had lost. Eventually I drove. Not far, just enough distance to feel the air shift. I pulled into a quiet parking lot near the river, the kind of place teenagers went to drink cheap beer and grown men went to think about the mistakes that broke them. The water moved slow in the moonlight, black and endless, reflecting nothing back. I sat there with the window cracked, the damp smell of the river filling the car. My hand drifted to my left ring finger out of habit and the absence of weight. There startled me. Naked skin where a promise used to live. That's when it hit me. The silence I left her in wasn't just hers. It was mine too. The silence of no explanations, no apologies, no scenes. Just absence. People think silence is weakness. They think if you don't scream, you've lost. But silence can be sharper than rage. Rage burns out. Silence lingers. I thought about her words again. This is my body, not yours. At first they had sliced me open, stripped me of everything I thought marriage meant. But as I sat there staring at the water, I began to understand. She was right. It was her body. And if she chose to give it to someone else, to share our bed with another man, to let betrayal live where love used to sleep, that was her right. But it was also mine to leave. And I had. I whispered it out loud, just to feel it on my tongue. I left. The sound was small, stolen by the river breeze, but it carried more weight than any argument we could have had. The hours blurred. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke to the pale light of dawn bleeding over the horizon. My neck was stiff, my back sore, the kind of pain that tells you you're alive even when you wish you weren't. The world outside the car was waking up, joggers along the path, the river moving faster, birds calling like nothing had changed, but everything had. I started the car. The engine's rumble felt louder than it should have in the morning quiet. I pulled out of the lot and drove toward a future I hadn't planned for but knew I needed. There would be lawyers, papers, arguments over things we once thought would last forever. But not that morning. That morning, there was only me, the road, and the silence I carried like armor. Because silence, I realized, was not the absence of strength, it was the proof of it. Morning did not ask permission to arrive. It peeled the night off the city like tape off old paint, slow and stubborn, leaving ragged edges. I drove without music, without news, without even the hum of habit to distract me. The world around me performed its tricks. Coffee shop doors flipped to open, buses sighed at curbs, a woman jogged with a dog that looked like it had never been, sad in its life, and I felt like I was watching a movie about a planet I used to live on. I parked outside our house because there were still things that were mine to take. The porch boards complained under my shoes with the same old creak. Nothing in wood remembers betrayal. Through the window I could see the frame I'd turned face down, the rectangle of absence catching the first light. For a second, I pictured walking back to the bedroom and finding her exactly where I'd left her, hair spread over the pillow, eyes hard as coins. I didn't go that far. I went to the hall closet and took a suitcase, then stood in the doorway to our room and waited, to feel something that would pin me to the threshold. There she was, awake now, propped against the headboard, wearing a robe tied with a knot that looked like a decision. "You're really doing this?" she asked, voice scratchy with sleep, or with the lack of it. "I already did," I said. The words were steady, like they belonged to somebody who had practiced them for years. She didn't argue. Maybe there was nothing left in the script. Maybe she was saving her lines for the stage with the judge and the papers and the words that cost money to say. She watched me open drawers and fold shirts with the care you give a ritual. I took socks and a sweater and the book I had read half of and would never finish. I left the ring on the dresser. Leaving it once wasn't enough. There are gestures you have to repeat to make your hands believe them. In the bathroom, I stood over the sink, where I used to watch us brush our teeth side by side, our faces a two-person symmetry. My toothbrush leaned in its cup, the bristles, splayed like a person who had stayed too long at a party. I took it. I took the razor, the cologne I rarely wore, the little bottle of aspirin for headaches that had names I couldn't pronounce. When I turned to leave, my eye snagged on her phone on the counter, face down, obedient to its new training. I didn't touch it. I had enough ghosts. Downstairs, my suitcase wheels thudded over the stair treads like a metronome. In the living room, the show we'd paused the night before still hung open-mouthed on the screen. I clicked the TV off. The room looked relieved. On the way out, I paused by the small table where we kept the catch-all bowl, the one that swallowed keys and spare change and ticket stubs from when we used to go places together on purpose. There, beneath the keys and a paperclip and a dandelion stem I'd never noticed, lay the hotel keycard I'd dropped back into her bag the week before. She had taken it out and left it there like a calling card. My chest went hot and then cold. I didn't need more proof. Proof had stopped being the point. But I slipped the card into my pocket anyway, not for the court, not for a fight, but as a souvenir of the exact second I decided to stop being the person who forgives the unforgivable. Just because he's afraid of the alternative. I didn't look back when I closed the door. I would not memorialize the angle of her shoulders in the morning light, the way she held her coffee cup when she was thinking what to say. Some memories deserve starvation. They shrink if you never feed them. I checked into a small, forgettable motel off the frontage road. Blue carpet, heavy drapes, a bedspread patterned with a geometry no one had the heart to love. I set the suitcase on the rack and sat on the edge of the bed like a man waiting for a verdict that had already been read. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old air. It was perfect. No history, no pictures, no betrayals baked into the walls. Just four corners and a door that did what it was told. Grief is a tidal thing. It doesn't arrive once and drain away. It comes in sets, some big, some small, until you start measuring your days by how soaked you are when you get back to shore. I let it hit me. I didn't try to speak over it or reason with it or tape it to the ceiling with some speech about perspective. I lay on that bed and let the water fill my lungs and recede and fill them again. I cried without making a sound. People on TV weep like sirens. In real life it's quieter, a body leaking where it's thin. When the tide eased, I sat up and opened the cheap motel notepad. At the top of the first page, I wrote a word I had been avoiding like an illness: lawyer. Under it, I made a list, each line a nail in a door I was closing from the hallway side. Call records, late-night clusters to the same number, rideshare receipts, dates, times, pickups near the hotel. Hotel receipts, 2 drinks, late charges. Key. Card chain hotel, find dates, photos none, and none needed. Timeline, texts, calls, nights working late. Witnesses, neighbors, probably not. Keep it clean. Personal property, inventory essentials, photograph in case. Bank accounts, freeze joint credit. Protect savings. Spare keys, change locks later. I snapped a picture of the list and emailed it to myself with the subject line, reality. Then I called a friend, the kind of friend who doesn't ask questions in the first 10 seconds. He gave me a name, a divorce attorney with a reputation for fairness first, fire second. The office didn't open for 2 hours. I watched the clock. Expected anger to keep me upright. Instead, practicality did. It's easier to walk when you're carrying something heavy that has a handle, and paperwork is a handle. I transferred funds to my personal account. I changed my email password. I logged out of the streaming services like it mattered. I wrote my parents a message that said only, "I love you. I'm safe. I'll call when I can." My mother would read it with all the words I didn't say drifting off it like steam. At 9 o'clock, the attorney's receptionist answered with the calm voice of someone who spends her days arranging the end of promises. "We can see you this afternoon," she said. "Bring any documents you have. And I'm sorry." The last 2 words were a band-aid on a bullet hole, but I thanked her like it was morphine. The office sat on the 4th floor of a building that pretended it wasn't sad with ficus trees and tidy magazines. The lawyer Lee shook my hand the way you hold a bridge steady while someone crosses it. No pity, no excitement. A human being who had seen worse and better and would not confuse my life for entertainment. "Tell me what you need," he said. "I need it to be over without a war," I said. "But if it is a war, I need to win." He nodded. "Start at the beginning." I did. I told him about the phone face down, the new ringtone, the cologne that didn't belong in my house. I told him about the hotel key card and the receipts, and the drive to the nicer hotel where I watched her go in, and a stranger follow. I told him about standing in our bedroom doorway, about telling the man to leave. I told him what she said, the sentence that tried to make philosophy out of a cut. He listened without interruption, pen moving, eyes steady. When I finished, he leaned back. "You have enough," he said. "In our state, infidelity matters. More on paper than people think. But it's not about punishing, it's about clarity. Property division, spousal support, her choices will be relevant. We'll proceed cleanly. We'll serve her. No scenes. You don't speak to her without counsel. You don't go back to the house alone. You don't threaten, you don't taunt, you don't post. You let the paperwork do what shouting never can." I nodded. His rules sounded like oxygen. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside, intake forms, a checklist, a place where my marriage would learn a new language. He asked for dates and copies, for bank statements and screenshots. I handed him the receipts, the call logs, the email with the subject line reality. I laid the hotel key card on the table. It looked cheap and obscene on his polished wood. "We'll hire a process server," he said. "Neutral, professional, you don't need to be there." "I want to be," I heard myself say, and then realized I didn't. "No, I don't. Not anymore." "Good," he said. "That's the smarter version of strength." He outlined the next steps with the firmness of someone mapping the shortest path through a burning building. Draft petition, file, temporary orders, service, disclosures, negotiation. Each word sounded like a rung on a ladder that I hoped reached the roof. When I left the office, I had a folder with my name on it, and a feeling that the air around me had edges again. I drove back to the motel and set the folder on the little round table by the window. For a long minute, I just looked at it. The lawyer's folder had weight. It bent the tablecloth toward it, the way a planet bends light. I placed my palm on. Like you touch a door you're not ready to open. Paper is thin, meaning is not. Night fell in the slow way that gives you too much time to realize you're alone. I ate something that tasted like cardboard warmed by good intentions. I showered and watched the steam make a ghost of me in the mirror. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, where a water stain made the shape of a country I could not name. I tried to picture a future in an apartment with high windows and plants I would try not to kill. I tried to picture mornings that did not hurt. The mind will do what you ask if you ask softly enough. Around 11, my phone lit up with her name. I didn't answer. The second call came 3 minutes later, then a text. We should talk. I held the phone until the screen dimmed and went black. I set it face down on the nightstand. I learned fast. Grief shifted into a different shape as midnight crept in. The first shape had been drowning. This one was empty rooms. I walked around, inside myself, and turned off lights that were already off. At 2 in the morning, I sat on the floor with my back against the bed and looked at the lawyer's folder again. I opened it. The first page began with my name, then hers, then a case caption that made our life look like a problem that could be solved with the right paragraphs. My eyes blurred halfway through the draft petition. Not from tears, from the shock of seeing something you thought was infinite strapped to 13 pages with headings, irreconcilable differences. The words did not know how to hold what I had seen in my doorway, or what she had said with her chin lifted, or the sound of my ring kissing the wood. The phone buzzed once more, not a call, a voicemail. I didn't play it. There are sentences you never need to hear to know their shape. When I finally slept, it was the thin kind, full of brittle dreams made of ordinary objects behaving badly. I woke before the alarm in the grey that happens just before morning decides. I made coffee with the little machine that sounded like it was trying to breathe through a straw. I drank it hot and unkind. Then I dialed the process server's number Lee had texted. A man answered, voice brisk, polite in the way of someone who makes a living knocking on doors with papers that change lives. We confirmed her full name, her place of work, her likely hours. He asked whether she carried herself like someone who would slam a door. No, I said. She carries herself like someone who thinks doors belong to her. Noted, he said. We scheduled it for the next day. Service at her office midday, clean and quick. No theatre, no hallway show. The kind of ending that starts in a fluorescent lobby and smells like toner. When I hung up, the room felt smaller. It often does when a plan becomes a date on a calendar. I packed my suitcase again, not because I needed to leave, but because movement has its own mercy. I stood there holding the handle and realized I was shaking. I set the suitcase down, placed the lawyer's folder on top, and drew a breath that scraped my ribs on the way in. Tomorrow, a stranger would say her name in a public place and hand her an envelope. Tomorrow, the line I had drawn in our bedroom would be ink on paper the county would stamp. Tomorrow, the silence I had chosen would learn to speak in filings and orders. I looked at the door, and then my phone lit up with a new message, from an unknown number this time, containing a single image taken in my own kitchen the night before. Her. Lover's hand on the stem of the cursed wine glass, her bare shoulder in the frame's edge, and in the center of the counter, beside the bowl for keys and spare change, my wedding ring where I had not left it. The photo sat on my phone like a live wire humming in my palm. My ring, the one I'd left on the dresser with finality, now mocked me from the center of the kitchen counter. Not a relic anymore, not a symbol of silence. It had been moved, paraded, used. Her lover's hand on the wine glass, her shoulder bare, as if to say we're not ashamed. And then the cruelest detail of all, someone inside my house had taken the picture. Someone had chosen to send it to me. For a long minute I didn't breathe. My chest stayed locked, like my body refused to participate in this theater of humiliation. My first instinct was to drive back, to rip the photo's smug reality from their hands and smash it against the truth I already carried. But rage is a fire that consumes the person holding it, and I had already decided I would not burn for her. Instead, I forwarded the image to Lee, my lawyer. Evidence, I typed beneath it. My hand stopped shaking when I hit send. Paperwork didn't mock, paperwork didn't lie, paperwork didn't pretend to love you while betraying you in the next breath. His reply was short. This helps. We move faster. Those 3 words were oxygen. Faster. Out. Free. The next day unfolded with the mechanical rhythm of inevitability. I ate breakfast I didn't taste, put on a shirt I didn't remember buttoning, drove to Lee's office and sat across from him while he confirmed everything one last time. The process server will serve her at noon, he said. You don't need to be anywhere near it. Stay clear. Clear, I repeated. The word felt foreign in my mouth. At 11:55, I sat in my car outside a coffee shop 2 blocks from her office, watching the second hand creep around my watch. I pictured the lobby. I pictured her in her tailored suit, her professional smile ready for clients and colleagues. I pictured the stranger walking up to her with an envelope in his hand, saying her name in front of everyone. I pictured her fingers closing around the papers, her eyes scanning the first line. At 12:03, my phone buzzed. 1 word from Lee. Served. I leaned back in the seat and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the night I first flipped her phone over in my hand. That night I didn't stay in the motel, so I checked into a different place, a temporary apartment with blank white walls and a bed that smelled like nothing. I unpacked slowly, each item claiming its own space, each drawer a small declaration. I am not going back. My toothbrush leaned, alone in a cup, and for once it looked right that way. Grief still came, but it was changing shape again. Not drowning, not empty rooms. Now it was echoes, faint and fading. Her laugh through a door, her perfume on a coat, her hand moving mine, away like a curtain. They came, they lingered, and then they left. Freedom doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It arrives in the quiet acts you once took for granted. Making coffee and realizing no one else will drink it. Sleeping diagonally across the bed and waking without guilt. Walking barefoot across the floor and feeling the ground belong to you. Weeks passed, papers filed, responses drafted, hearings scheduled. She tried to reach out a few times, texts, a voicemail, an email that began with, "We should talk," and ended with, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Lee answered for me. Each reply was cold, professional, clipped. My silence had found a translator in legalese. The photo of my ring never left my phone. I didn't delete it. I didn't stare at it either. It sat in a folder called Evidence, stripped of power, stripped of theater, nothing but pixels in a case file. One afternoon, after signing another stack of documents, Lee looked at me and said, "You're almost through it. Don't let her pull you back in now. People try. They want to control the story even when they've lost it. Don't let her write your ending." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. The final hearing was brief. A judge in black robes glanced through pages that summarized 12 years of my life in less time than it takes to read a grocery list. He asked me if I understood. I said yes. He asked her if she understood. She said yes too, her voice calm, like she was agreeing to weather. The gavel fell. Just a soft knock of wood on wood, but it sounded like thunder to me. We walked out of the courtroom in opposite directions. She didn't look back. Neither did I. That night I went back to the river lot where I had sat in the car after walking out of our house. The water moved faster this time, reflecting the lights of the city. Like a ribbon pulled through fire. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, breathing air that no longer felt stolen. "This is my body," she had told me, as if the words were a weapon. And maybe they were. But freedom is the right to lay down a weapon you never wanted to. Hold, she could keep her body. She could keep her lies. She could keep her cold, sharp defiance. What I kept was my silence. What I gained was my freedom. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without dreams. And when I woke, I didn't feel like a husband abandoned. I felt like a man returned.